Hi everybody, VAP-Chan here, semi-famous fetish artist and cartoon fan. I like most of the old cartoon studios, but the one that's probably my favorite is Terrytoons. Yep, that's right. The one that every cartoon critic sees as just being a cheapo crap factory. But before I show you why these cartoons are so special to me, let me give you a little background on the studio and the man behind it. Paul Terry was born on February 19th, 1887. Paul Terry made his first cartoon, Down on the Phony Farm, in 1915. The short's main character, Farmer Alfalfa, would follow Terry to the Bray Studio in 1916, Edison Pictures in 1917, and Terry's own Fables Studio in 1921. In October 1928, the Fables Studio released Dinner Time, the first sound cartoon. Rather than the later process of having the soundtrack recorded first and timing the animation to the soundtrack, Dinner Time was effectively a silent cartoon with music and sound effects added in post. Upon seeing the short, Walt Disney, who had released the silent cartoon Plain Crazy earlier that year, was inspired to make Steamboat Willie, the first cartoon actually timed to its music, and to add soundtracks to Plain Crazy and the as-of-then unreleased Gallopin' Gaucho. After being fired from his own studio for his reluctance to make more sound cartoons, Paul Terry almost immediately founded Terrytoons. The Fables Studio continued making cartoons under Amédée Van Buren, including Cubby Bear and the human versions of Tom and Jerry. Going into the 1930s, Terry did eventually fully go to sound, with background music scored by Philip Scheib, and started making color cartoons in 1938. In the color era, Terry introduced new characters such as Gandy Goose, Sourpuss, Dinky Duck, Heckle and Jekyll, and Mighty Mouse. Jim Tier began working at the studio in 1946, bringing his bizarre style of animation to the table. Decades later, Jim would heavily influence the art and movement style of Ren and Stimpy. In 1955, Paul Terry sold the studio to CBS. Gene Deitch was put in charge, bringing in a more modernistic, flatter style of animation, and characters such as Sidney the Elephant, John Doormat, Gaston Le Crayon, and Clint Clobber. Deitch would reuse Clobber's design for Tom's owner in the 60s Tom and Jerry shorts. In 1959, Ralph Bakshi began working at Terry as a cell painter, and quickly rose up the ranks to director on series such as Deputy Dog, Sad Cat, and The Mighty Heroes. Paul Terry died October 25, 1971. Terrytoons closed down in 1973, and its assets were sold off to Viacom. Filmation produced various revivals of the Terry characters during the late 70s, and in 1987, Ralph Bakshi and John Kricfalusi, yes, we know, produced Mighty Mouse, The New Adventures. New Adventures was the last major appearance of any of the Terry characters. Now, by the time I was born, Terrytoons were completely off TV and pretty hard to find on home media as well. The only ones I ever got to see as a kid were the public domain shorts, Wolf Wolf, The Talking Magpies, Dingbatland, and one that we'll be talking about later. But in the Everything is on YouTube era, I've gotten to see more and more of them, and I've really grown to love them. And I hope after I show you a few of my favorites, you will too. Let's get into it. Monkey Meat. This 1930 cartoon, like many of the era, concerns animals dancing, singing, and playing musical instruments. Its appeal lies less in the story, and more in the sheer oddness of the gags and set pieces. I particularly like this opera-singing monkey and her weird giant Adam's apple, the elephant using his trunk as a flute, and the finale in which the animals ride around on giant soap bubbles. It reminds me of when the Moomins ride on clouds. It's actually kind of beautiful in a goofy way. Fanny and the Lion's Den. This 1933 cartoon is one of Terry's melodrama parodies, featuring Fanny Zilch in the original human version of Oil Can Harry. Harry would later go on to be Mighty Mouse's enemy. This is kind of a blown-out print, but it's all we have because Viacom won't officially release these. Lots of fun, weird stuff in this one, like the living haystacks, Fanny and the Lions randomly becoming friends off-screen, This one dancing lion that I believe was animated by Bill Titla. Fanny's campy acting Mountie boyfriend and his little detective dog. And this really well-drawn hippo. Also Fanny's hot. The Three Bears. This isn't the one with the spaghetti, that's the 1939 version. This version, from 1934, is vastly different. The bears aren't Italian. Goldilocks is some kind of animal. A sheep, maybe. The chairs are alive. And the whole thing is narrated by this guy, who gets the crap beaten out of him at the end. Wait, if the chairs are alive... Oh my god, Goldilocks is a murderer! Ye Olde Toy Shop, from 1935. This is the cartoon I had on a tape as a kid. It was the edited version put out by Castle Films under the title Christmas Toy Shop. It begins the way these typically do. The old toy maker locks up his shop for the night and all of the toys come to life. The toys all have really good designs, especially the Art Deco-y soldiers. This part is cut on the Castle Films release, presumably for time constraints. Eventually, an evil spider shows up to menace a toy version of Little Miss Muffet. The soldiers set off in pursuit and spray him with a flit gun. Yes, that's what those are called. The spider's legs coming off really pissed off my grandma for some reason when I watched this at her house as a kid. She had weird standards for what was too violent for kids. Let's see that again. For years, the Wikipedia page for Porky and Wacky Land has contained this cryptic paragraph, and I quote, "There were at least 2 Terrytoons plagiarizations of Porky and Wacky Land in the 1940s or 50s. Dingbat Land in 1949 starred Gandy Goose and Sourpuss. The role of the dodo was taken by a minor Terrytoons character, Dingbat. The second film, a more direct plagiarization of the Porky Pig Dodo cartoons, starred a British soldier and a dodo stand-in. The creature didn't talk, but made strange hooting noises and flung flames from a tuft of hair on top of its head. Not going to go into them slamming Terrytoons for plagiarism while ignoring the fact that Looney Tunes did it themselves all the damn time. That Senator Claghorn movie would make a good future review, VAP. But for years, I have been searching for it on and off, and just recently found it on YouTube. The Red-Headed Monkey.
Hello? Are there any unusual animals around here?
Interestingly, the Wikipedia article kind of gets this cartoon wrong, as the dodo stand-in isn't the main antagonist, or main protagonist depending on your point of view. The main guy who isn't the British hunter is actually the titular red-headed monkey. Ha! Titular! I kinda wish the Firetail guy figured more heavily into the cartoon, but it's still pretty funny with lots of well-drawn animals. Well, that's it for this episode. Join me next time when I talk about one of my favorite lesser-known Muppet films.